Hello, hello. Today on How to Do It, we're going to cover a charcoal study on a bunch of objects. You need to have covered level 1-1 and 1-2 demos before you come to this. All right, let's begin. So one of the advantages of using charcoal for our study is that charcoal is laid as powder on paper using the blender sponge. So it doesn't make deep imprints on paper, making it easy to erase and easy to blend. So should you erase too much or lift too much charcoal off the paper, you can always add charcoal powder to patch it up. Since the general laying of the charcoal powder is at value number 5, about there, I begin by focusing on areas which are of value 0 to 3. Don't worry about the exact shapes and much less the details at the moment. Because most people started learning drawing by drawing outlines as well as the geometry of the objects that they are looking at, there's a tendency to want to use the sharper point of the eraser to do the outlines of the objects one by one. You need to resist this tendency and focus on capturing the values 0 to 3 and the relative position of these patches on the paper. It is unlikely that you get a sense of what you're drawing at the moment. That will emerge much later in the sketch. So trust the process and let's continue. So as you work through the values 0 to 3 patches, always do comparisons between one patch and another to see which patch might be lighter as compared to other patches. It doesn't matter which patch or which area you start working on because it's a gradual development based on comparisons, and you need to work back and forth between different patches. You need to work from patch to patch and not over-focus on any particular patch. What a lot of people ended up doing is that they overwork a particular patch or a particular area, losing the context of that area against the rest of the scene. If at this point you find the manipulation of the eraser difficult, meaning to say that you find difficulty in creating this varying degree of lightness as well as getting these soft shapes, then I would suggest that you revisit the exercises in level 1-1 before you continue with this exercise. To show you what has happened so far in our development, I darkened the reference photo. You see how the lighter portions are showing up. Do remember that the photograph is only a reference. It is not the real thing that I'm looking at as a human. I'm using the pinpoint eraser to mark in a highlight, but it's not necessary. Since most of the lighter areas have already been treated, I now introduce the charcoal stick to work on areas of value 8, 9, and 10. So the way I work in the dark values is exactly the same as how I had approached the lighter values. And the way I use the charcoal stick is also very much like how the eraser has been used. So you use the different surfaces as well as different edges of the charcoal stick, very much like the eraser. Likewise, always do comparisons between the patches to see which one is darker and which one is lighter. Okay, and I noticed that a particular area is a little too dark, so I use the blender pen to soften that part of the shading. Okay, I took the eraser to again work on the lighter tones. And at this point, I noticed that the placement of the lower right-hand object is a bit on the low side. So I'm going to correct it. Easy peasy. Reworking it. Now the position of that object on the lower right hand side is much better. I need to use the blender pen, some charcoal powder, as well as the eraser, combination of these, to form the surfaces on the lower right hand side. At this point of development, the general value structure of the scene has already been established. So this is when I begin working on the subtle details of the values. That would generally refer to values 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, you constantly compare one area against the other and work through the entire area and remind yourself not to overwork any particular area. If you are generally satisfied with the value treatment in your picture, this is when you can start adding in the values which are 9 and 10. You probably noticed by now that the objects you were trying to draw that seemed very complicated at the beginning are emerging like magic. I now switch to the charcoal pencil, which is able to give me much darker lines and more defined lines to put in the darkest areas or darkest lines on the sketch. And like the usage of the charcoal pencil to add in the darkest values, I also use the pinpoint eraser to put in some highlights. And finally, I use the side of the eraser to lift a bit more charcoal off the backgrounds. Okay, and just some final touches using the blender pen. I dipped it in the charcoal powder just to add some really dark areas in the sketch. That's about it. Subscribe to see more. Thank you.